FicMedia.com presents Beyond the Wall, a Game of Thrones podcast. With hosts Christiana Ellis, Jute Schubert, Vivid Muse, and Nookchus. Oh noes! Vivid Muse is away again, unfortunately. So. But we are joined here by Christiana and Nettie. How are you?
As previously discussed before the start of the live stream, I am super tired, but rallying through sheer force of will.
And outrage. Well, maybe not outrage. How about you, Nettie?
I'm doing well. You know, it's I mentioned to Christiana, it's summertime and I feel like I should be having more fun. And I think that's because we were all tricked as kids to think that summer is supposed to be when you have off and get to have fun. But you spend most of your life working during the summer. Yeah. And then you get crabby and you actually feel heat as you get older.
True. I should probably say this is season 7, episode 3 of Beyond the Wall. We're going to talk about season 7 of Game of Thrones. This one's titled The Queen's Justice, with no spoilers past the currently aired episodes.
Yay.
As always.
Yay for no spoilers, I guess. That's what I was just yaying there.
It would be tricky to do at this point, but I'm sure there are some spoilers out there.
That's what I've heard. I've not gone looking and not found them as a result. But.
Yeah.
Although there are a few things that were in the books that haven't really been touched on. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we still keep that out.
Things that could theoretically come back in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about that today during this episode.
Mm-hmm. There's recently an HBO hack, and apparently there's like screen captures of the next episode or something, and a whole bunch of internal documents and scripts and stuff.
Avoid those like the plague.
Yeah.
And also just we need someone to ring the shame bell at those people. I mean, like, no, don't do that, you guys. Come on.
Why ruin other people's fun?
Ooh, there you go. Shame.
Shame. It really is, you know, why ruin other people's fun? Because like there's no point to grab these things, you know, a week before or to put them out of context. I mean, it'd be one thing if there was anything to be gained, but it just feels like trollish behavior to me at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, everybody can understand there being an anticipation, and some people will be tempted as a result. But to cater to that temptation is the way of the dark side.
True.
I wanted to make a Game of Thrones comparison there instead of going Star Wars, but there's not really an obvious element that kind of correlates there, right?
Right.
Everything is like which
so gray.
That's
like
the cold side. The ice side.
What is spoiled will spoil again. No, I don't know. Anyway.
I don't think there was I didn't see any other news bits about the show or anything. I think we can jump right in to the discussion. And they jumped right in with the highly anticipated Jon and Dany meeting. Opens up at Dragonstone right on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Jon and Amos arrive, and I get to meet Tyrion again. Or he gets to meet Tyrion again. Take away the weapons and the boats.
Yeah.
Which was a little ominous.
Right. Well, and it's one of those things, too, where obviously it's not what Jon wants, but at a certain point, it's kind of like, I mean, why'd you even come here if you were worried about that type of element, right? Like, and once you're there on the beach, I mean...
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, if they're determined to just take you prisoner. But then again, I mean, the other element is, too, that he's the one that knows that he is not there to do what he's being asked to do.
Sure.
So it's one thing to be submitting into their custody when you know that you're going to do something they don't like.
Right. Yeah.
Still, this has been a season of interesting character combinations and making connections happen that we have been wanting for a long time. And that obviously John and Danny is the big one here because they're meeting for the first time, these two very relevant characters, but also getting these little reunions like, Tyrion and John.
Yeah.
And them talking about Sansa.
Yeah.
I found very compelling.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. There was something really neat about that. And Tyrion's like, she's smarter than she lets on. Oh, she's letting on.
Yeah, she's let on.
And first impressions of this episode, I just have to put this out there. Every scene is so compressed, full of things. Like I could probably talk an hour for every scene, and I'm going to try not to. But this was a very tightly compressed, full of character bits things.
Yeah.
And this scene alone was just flawless. We could talk like 3 hours just on this scene.
I love the look on John's face when the dragon swung over and flew over. And just like, man, it's one thing.
Kit Harington can act.
I think anyone who insists that he can't is stubborn at this point. Like, this is like, of course he can. Anyway, but yeah, I was my thought though when the dragon swooped down on them was like, oh, power move.
Yeah.
Not that I think that Danny really planned it consciously that way, but obviously I think that, it's something that she would have approved of, and the dragons could, whether it's not clear if they have any sort of a telepathic connection or whatever, but, is it just coincidence, or certainly wasn't something that she took any steps to avoid. So,
or, they smelled, hey, that kind of smells like a Targaryen down there.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's frustrating because obviously one of these things that is the nature of any show that's been going this long and has such a rich world building and depth of complexity in the story and all of that is going to naturally inspire speculation and theories and everything. And I love all of that. And I don't want this to come across as dismissive, but it's one thing to have like fan theories and fan canon, but boy, there are people who are just taking the thinnest of straws and building entire castles on them. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Just because that is a theoretically plausible explanation for something that has a much simpler explanation in the scene.
No, although in defense of the crazy crackpot theorists, because I love me some crazy crackpot theories, book readers had so many years between books that's all we had to do is come up with theories. And I don't think many of these crazy crackpot theorists are people that didn't read the books.
Yeah.
That's my hypothesis.
I think you're right. And then I also would say that in general, the specific theory that I think you were referencing there.
No, I was talking about Jon Snow.
Yeah.
Targaryen.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'm just saying that was not one of the ones that I was going to say is thin in terms of supporting material.
Yeah.
I was mostly kind of extrapolating into some of the broader stuff of people reading into a line of dialogue and saying, oh, but see how she makes this weird face at the end of the sentence? That obviously means that blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I saw someone spin into this whole diatribe about what it means that when the Maester says that Maester Luwin kept records of every raven that, and then Littlefinger looks at him and then spun into this whole theory about how Littlefinger's going to Barbara Streisand himself about how murdering Robert Aaron or John Aaron and back in the beginning. And I'm just like, dude, nobody cares about that anymore.
No. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. That's going a little.
Not to mention the fact that Sansa already knows that stuff.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
So I mean, it's like,
yeah. Doesn't
I mean,
really
she
make
doesn't
much
know
sense.
every single element of it, but Lysa confessed to killing John Aaron like in front of her, and she would be stupid to think that Littlefinger wasn't involved. Anyway, that's spinning off into crazy territory.
Yeah.
Let's not do that. So we're back in the scene.
One of the things that I noticed is Davos loves to talk about people's accents.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the I don't know. I thought it was really cute how he was trying to establish a relationship with Miss Sandy, and she was like, "Yeah, okay, we're moving."
Yeah. I did feel like it was a slightly weird line, and I was wondering if you guys, what you guys thought about it. The bit where he talks briefly to her and she kind of blows him off a little bit, like she's polite, but sort of shuts him down in a polite way. And then he just turns to John and is like, "This place has changed." And I'm like,
yeah,
you talked to one girl on the beach.
Yeah.
You haven't even been up in the castle yet.
You know, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, I don't quite get what that's supposed to mean. But then later on, he says he just has a flea bottom accent. So that's why I paired the two scenes together, trying to figure out, what is he talking about? I don't get it.
I think what it is it's an attempt to build something that they haven't really earned yet, which is just a recognition. Davos was there when Stannis had it, and it's a very different setup now that Daenerys is there, and just communicating that we want there to be a different feel about the place than when Stannis was there. And I think that that's just what they're going for. And so what they're trying to do is it was basically just a clunky attempt to have Davos seed that.
It was one of the few clunky scenes in the episode, though.
Yeah, I mean, I like him. I don't mind him talking with Missandei, but that line just felt like it came out of nowhere. It's like, what is that? What do you mean? And why is that the response to the exchange you just had?
Agreed. That's the thing. I felt like so much of this episode, everything had a purpose. Mm-hmm. That one thing sticking out to me is like, I don't understand.
Mm-hmm. But I'm very forgiving of that element because Davos is the best and I like him.
Yes, he is. We love Davos.
Viv had a note on when Jon seeing the dragons, how it's even after giants and dire wolves and the others and all that, how he's still stunned at the sight of something because it's so foreign. I mean,
yeah,
dragons,
right? Yeah, dragons are intense. And I was actually, I mean, this kind of gets into the next scene a little bit, but just the idea that when she's so skeptical about an army of the dead, this, myths and legends, and I'm like, is no one going to point out that she brought dragons back?
Exactly.
Right.
With, not that John knows that, but she knows that it was with blood magic. So,
And why didn't Melisandre tell them that she brought Jon Snow back with blood magic?
Well, so this episode, in a really weird offhand way, answers the question that we've had for a little while, which is that apparently Jon is not telling people that he's been brought back from the dead. Yeah. It seems like they're keeping that as kind of, the people who know are asked to kind of,
Ixnay on the Easus J.
Yeah.
And then they kind of dismiss it, which I'm wondering, it seems like something that'll probably come back. It seems a little significant.
Well, especially since they actually, it's definitely going to come back if it's bad writing if it doesn't, because not only did they have an obvious thing happen in that scene where Davos almost mentions it and Jon stops him, but then Tyrion and Dany specifically bring it back up later too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's got to be them planning, excuse me, to come back to that. But given that that was kind of an open question of if people don't know he came back from the dead, then how are people justifying in their minds that he is not in the Night's Watch anymore? How is he not seen as an Oathbreaker? And the answer might just be people actually never really did care about that very much when it was in their interests to ignore it.
That's my belief.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about the oath to the wall because nobody actually cares about the wall. They think that it's just snarks and grumpkins up there. They think that they're protecting them from wildlings. They're just a glorified border in most people's minds. So Paulette says she really dug the line that Tyrion used. I would like to say you get used to it, but you don't. I agree. That was a great. He had a lot of good lines, that. Yeah. It's a long story. I was drunk for most of it.
Always does.
Yeah. Oh, Tyrion is so great.
I see another comment from Mark Minko. People already believe the dragons existed. They're just extinct. But the White Walker is just legends about 8,000. So there is, I can see that.
It's valid. I mean, it's kind of like the distinction between saying, well, I don't know, woolly mammoth is not even appropriate because that's still a long, long time ago. Yeah, so to be sure, dragons are something that everybody is kind of much more concretely aware of. Oh, yeah, dragons were a real thing and we thought they were all dead, but turns out they're not, is less of a big ask than, an army of frozen zombies. But, at the same time, the element, though, of Dany knows what went into bringing the dragons back. So, and she is also aware of, if we remember, Karth and the warlocks there, and so she knows that stuff like that goes on, and not necessarily these specifically, but so it's not that I wanted her to believe him as much as I think that it makes she should be a little bit more open, I think, too. Yeah. And again, the thing is, Dany's in a weird spot this season, so I don't want to actually put on her that she's not doing something that she's supposed to. But I guess what I'm just saying is, from my perspective, she has good personal experience to support the idea that supernatural things happen and are happening with an increased frequency. So in that sense, it doesn't mean that she's going to believe him necessarily. Certainly not just, again, like Tyrion says later, it's not based on a first meeting. But at the same time, it can't come across as something that's just it can't come across as something that's just totally insane either.
Yeah.
Definitely. Set up to Varys and Melisandre. Find out Mel's heading to Volantis, but will return. Isn't Volantis all ruins with stone men?
You're thinking of Valyria.
Right? Valyria. Oh, okay, right. Okay. Cool.
I like how she says that she's got to come back to die there, just like Varys. And in my head, I'm picturing Londo and Jakar choking each other, that premonition, and I'm like, ooh. So that's my little fan art in my head right now.
Yeah, I didn't look it up, but what it actually made me think of is trying to remember what little creepy prophecies she made back when she was with the Brotherhood Without Banners and met Arya and stuff like that, because she was doing a thing briefly where it's I looked in your eyes and I've seen all the eyes I'm ever going to see, and so I know what's going to happen, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what she said, but because it was 4 seasons ago. But
well, she does say that she's going to see Arya again.
Yeah,
that was one of the things that she had said. But yeah.
Yeah. So in any case, what do you guys think? So obviously she doesn't straight up tell Varys what it was. Mistakes were made, that sort of thing. And she actually doesn't even do that. It's not even mistakes were made. I mean, she specifically says, I didn't part on good terms because of mistakes that I made, terrible mistakes, but doesn't go into detail. What's your read on her sincerity level there? I mean, other than obviously not wanting to talk to them because of how she left things, but how seriously she takes her regret.
I think she regrets being wrong. I don't think she regrets her actions. It's a lot like, again, we're going to go back to when she meets Thoros of Myr and the Brotherhood Without Banners, when she is completely shocked. What do you mean you can bring him back from the dead? And she sees another red priest doing magic that she didn't know about. I think it's in that vein that she thought she knew. She was so sure she knew what she was supposed to do, and she knew what was going to happen. And then to see the things fail, her faith has been shaken. And she regrets being wrong. She regrets misreading. She's blaming herself for being wrong. But I don't think that she regrets killing Shireen.
Yeah.
I think that it's about being wrong. It's more about her connection to R'hllor than what she's done to actual people.
That's how it feels for me too. And in fact, you kind of, the way you expressed it there kind of crystallized it a little bit for me, I think, in the sense that it's not some, like, she recognizes that burning Shireen was a mistake, but it's not a moral regret of, I did this terrible thing. It was, I was so sure that I was right, and turned out I was wrong. And so I'm worried now that while I think I'm doing the right thing, I might be wrong again. So she's kind of keeping it at arm's length this time.
Yeah.
Instead of having it, keeping it close. So that's how, it read to me too.
So Marco says, I feel like Melisandre will come back with a group of red priests to fight in the long night, which I think that's a hopeful prediction for sure. Chooch?
Oh, you're muted, I think.
Maybe confer and say, have you guys been seeing, what have you guys been seeing in the flames?
Yeah. I really feel like the red priests and priestesses need to definitely communicate a little bit better. It's like, okay, so this is what I'm seeing. Let's try to see, what do we think that it means? Let's come to a consensus.
Well, and that ties into was it the first episode or the second or last week that we were just talking about the possibility that while the Lord of Light may well be actually giving visions to people, it may be much more of a case where he's telling each individual person what they need to hear in order to do what the Lord of Light wants, as opposed to actually showing everybody genuine visions.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. Because I'm pretty sure that Sandor did not see the same thing that Melisandre did.
Yeah. So, hard to say. I did think it's always a little interesting when Varys kind of gets out-creeped by someone.
Right.
Because he's trying to go ahead and look at Melisandre already sort of withdrawing and saying, yeah, keep going.
Don't come back.
Yeah. I don't think it's safe for you here. So, yeah, maybe just don't come back. Yeah. But then...
That was Viv's note, was still the queen of creeping people out.
Well, and as it's kind of long established with his character going back to, I think, season 2, that he definitely is very aware of some supernatural things going on, but has mostly stayed away from it where he can, because that seems to be the one kind of thing that really bothers him and unsettles him in a way that most things don't.
I feel like for Varys, because of his experience, you know, and of course we're talking about the reason he's a eunuch is, you know, it was taken and it was thrown into a fire and used for magic, is that that to him is like fire for Sandor.
Yeah.
It really is a parallel that you know, Varys is afraid of magic, so he doesn't want to be right in the thick of it. I mean, and yeah, he's around dragons, but you'll notice he stayed away from Dany for quite a while and only joined her just as she came to Westeros. And it actually kind of reminds me of Mugen a little in the game on so many levels. He was turned into a fox spirit, so he hates magic and will not use a magic weapon.
This is the D&D campaign that I run with Chooch and Viv, and Mugen is Jared Axelrod's character, in case anybody was not already aware of that.
Yes. Nice little plug there.
No spoilers. We had a major event last episode.
Yeah.
I heard it went for a while.
Well, I mean, it's I don't know. Let's not talk about that right now, just because I am fuzzy enough that it would be easy to go out on long tangents. Right. But yeah, so at the same time, it's definitely clear that magic stuff does have a way of cutting through Varys's sort of practiced defenses in a way that he's not comfortable with. All the more reason for him to want her to leave. But she gets that last word of like, oh yeah, I'll come back. And he's like, oh, you probably shouldn't. And she's like, oh no, I'll come back to die. Like you. Just like you.
She needed like a creepy little bony finger when she said it.
Right.
Little dog.
You could only see her true self.
Yeah. Yep.
The big moment, the throne room.
Fire and ice.
And they addressed the king thing right up front.
Yeah.
Oh, I do want to mention that Melisandre does like put a pin on it. You know, she's like, I've introduced fire and ice. You know, and it's like, Song of Ice and Fire. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's a few things like that I think they're teasing us with, like when last week when Archmaester was talking about him writing his history of, you know, the events following Robert's Rebellion and all that, and you know, he just has a very generic title. It's like something with a little more poetry, maybe Sam suggests.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought it was interesting seeing her in the throne this time, sitting there and, you know, being very still and kind of surrounded by, you know, the contrasting colors, her, you know, with her white hair, you know, in light colored clothing, surrounded by this dark stone throne. And then, of course, the great humor of her long imperious list of titles. And then, this is Jon Snow.
No.
Awkward pause. He's the king in the north.
I saw a really great meme, and it was the Starbucks cup. And it had all of Dany's titles written on the side of the Starbucks cup, just completely filling it. And then on Jon Snow's, it was just John.
Did they spell John wrong?
Yeah. No, I don't think so. Not in the one I saw.
Yeah. There's some great stuff here, and I especially love that they, you know, it's in some ways it feels almost fan servicey to finally have these two characters meeting up, but I like that they really deal head on with the very real conflict between them, which is that, you know, for so long we've kind of thought of them as each good guys in their way, but they're so far away that their differences didn't really ever matter, but now they kind of do. And so at least at first blush, it's an irreconcilable difference between them. But I thought that was cool to kind of just dive right into there. But what I will say is that I feel like this reminds me of the bits with Sansa up in Winterfell, in the sense that when they're setting up these conflicts, the show seems to me to be positioning us to take Jon's side in these sorts of things, because they're having Dany act very imperious and not super charming in these moments, which is fine. I'm not saying she has to be charming and smiley or anything like that. I mean, she's doing what she's doing, but I just mean in terms of the emotional reaction it seems to be trying to provoke in us, the audience, seems like it's wanting us to take Jon's side.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think from the beginning, the Starks are the heroes. They're the ultimate good guys, so it makes sense.
But what's interesting about that, though, is that at least in the early books in the early seasons, part of the joy of the show and the story was its taking of these traditional fantasy tropes and subverting them deliberately, rather than playing into them.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I agree. I do think that we're supposed to be seeing Jon's side, but I think that's mostly because we know what he's talking about is real.
Mm-hmm.
I like that they butt heads right to begin with, because they are two strong personalities, and I think it would be unbelievable if they came to a consensus right away. And so I did enjoy that. I don't think that you were criticizing it. This is my take on the whole scene. And it's actually fortuitous for their relationship that they get interrupted by Varys with the bad news. Because I'm not sure how that conversation would have ended. And I think that having a break in their conversation was the best thing that could happen for that kind of a relationship. They were two heads of opposable strength butting up against each other. No one's going to move. So you need the time to break apart, regroup, speak individually in order for it to proceed. So it was actually really well crafted, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And I think that sorry, I don't want to just dominate the scene or anything, but I feel like part of what I'm reacting to is not even, it feels more subtle than that. I think part of it is just feeling like there is a carefully constructed flaw in Dany's whole argument that makes it ring hollow for me, because she towards the end starts to build into all of these things that she's accomplished perfectly, or personally, I mean, not perfectly, but the whole idea of he should bend the knee because of his ancestor's promise to her ancestor. Nobody cares about that anymore, and she should know better than to lean on that, I think. I mean, unless maybe that's a tactic to try to use first, but for him to, she's just saying, even towards the end of that argument, he's like, well, and your father's best friend sent assassins after me, and he's like, we don't know what Jon would necessarily know there, but for example, both Tyrion and Varys would definitely know. And yes, that's what caused Ned to resign as Hand of the King, and specifically his protest over that specific action. And that led to his death at the hands of your common enemy. And so that's not going to fly as a particularly good
for those assassins, I think what she was referring to is that she and Viserys were supposed to be killed as babies.
Well, but we never saw anything like that, though.
But we do know that Tywin sent Sir Gregor to kill Rhaegar's child, the baby that Rhaegar had, and also killed Oberyn's sister, which is what caused that whole feud.
But in the scene, that's not what she's referencing.
Oh, okay. See, I assumed that's what she was talking about.
In the show scene,
Okay. I thought she was
She's
talking
talking
about when she was a baby. My bad.
Well, no, I mean, like, I'm not saying you're wrong. As much as I think that the show is referencing a thing that happened in the show,
Okay.
not a hypothetical world building distinction.
No, I like I said, I must be remembering it differently. I thought she said babies, so that's fine.
Right. Yeah. And she lays down the, my father was evil. Don't judge him. Don't judge the daughter by the father's mistakes,
Yeah.
which obvious
It's like
callback there.
she was in Winterfell. She knew.
Yeah. Well, I guess sorry, go ahead.
Invalidates the whole argument of bend the knee because the ancestors did it, which John
Yes.
calls her on. You can't have it both ways.
I guess that's my point, is what that argument, their discussion felt like. And I don't want to come across as overly critical of it, because it was a great scene and I like that they're butting heads and having this argument. But the writing of it definitely felt to me like every point that she is given to say is a setup for John to defeat that element of the argument.
Yeah.
Right.
Even when she gets to the kind of the pinnacle of her case being made, which is that I'm so awesome, I did all of these things, that they follow me, and that's why you should too. But it comes down to, I don't know you. Yeah. I'm not going to start following you just because you're yelling at me.
Yeah.
And Davos is right there. Hey, man, he, did all these amazing things that have never been done before too. So
yeah.
And people will what is it? Hang on, I wrote it down. People follow him because they believe in him. Mm-hmm. She talks about how she's always believed in herself, and she talks about how the Dothraki and the Unsullied will die for her because they love her. But with what Davos says is that the Northerners and the Wildlings fight for Jon because they believe in him. And that'll come up in their next conversation. I'll come back to that note. Just remember that.
Well, it also struck me as a slightly perilous argument to make, though, just because, that took a knife in the heart. I know we sidestepped that point, but if we want to just sort of interrogate Davos a little bit on that, we want to just say, so in bringing that up, you're trying to highlight the sacrifice he made, but you're also pointing out that his own men mutinied against him because they were so opposed to what he was doing that they tried to murder him by stabbing him in the back, multiple of them. And when you say that the Northerners are following him, that's only after you won a war against all the ones that weren't following you. Yeah. So, and you did that with non-Northerner help with the Knights of the Vale. So, some of that stuff is a little fuzzier than it was portrayed there in that argument. But then again,
on the eases, Jay.
Yeah. Danny's stuff is the same way, though, right? Like, it's, she's made some mistakes that don't exactly cast her in the best light if you highlight those elements.
I did write down, because Danny says she's the last Targaryen, and I'm like, nope, no, you're not.
You're right.
You're not even the last Targaryen in this room. There were a lot of things that it was like, hey, remember last season when we found out who Jon's parents are? But
I think it's not formally confirmed, right? I mean, they didn't say it was definitely
correctly, not in the show because it was mumbled.
So her words were obscured. Now we can conclude that by connecting the dots, but it was not stated in the show.
Yeah, I think we came up with the. I don't know. I felt like we had said that, okay, there's mumblings, but we're pretty sure that's what it means.
Well, we can draw that conclusion, I think, safely, but it's not confirmed.
It wasn't explicit.
Yeah. We didn't hear the naming of the child. I remember that much. But I feel like this whole squabbling over titles is silly at this point. Like, you guys have a common enemy. Figure out a game plan. Figure that stuff out afterwards. Once you've had a relationship and you know who, whether or not you can trust this person. Because you know what? If John came and bent the knee and she said, okay, I'll give you the men that you need or whatever it is, he could do that and then turn around and betray her. The fact that he's not bending the knee, I guess I'm arguing against myself. I was going to say the fact that he's not bending the knee is more reason to trust. But I just feel like focusing on how are we going to carve up this land after a war that we haven't yet fought. It's putting the cart before the horse.
Well, but
it feels defeatist. Yeah, go ahead.
It's kind of like patent law. If you don't enforce your patents, then they're invalid. And she worries that the first one that she's meeting, if she doesn't do her spiel, that she's going to lose ground.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is too that we say they have a common enemy, and they kind of do, but they don't agree on who's the priority.
That's true,
right? Because John is saying, I don't care about Cersei. Sure, I don't like her, but if I bend the knee and you're saying, oh yeah, if I bend the knee, then you'll help me. What you're saying is, if I bend the knee and help you take out Cersei, then maybe later you'll help out with our problem if it turns out to be real. That's what you're saying. Whereas what I'm saying is, no, you need to send all of your resources north now and not waste time dealing with Cersei. So they're, bending the knee for now would mean agreeing with her that taking out Cersei is first.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think you kind of ended up arguing both sides of that argument your own.
I did. That's funny. Once you could think something, and then once you start vocalizing it, you're like, wait a second.
Viv's note for this scene was, I love Davos. He and Tyrion could fix so many wrongs. They stole the scene from the pose off between the avatars of ice and fire.
Yeah. I wouldn't have minded having a conversation between the two of them specifically, like instead of them each just chiming into the larger conversation.
Sure.
I would love that, actually.
But
maybe next week.
We don't have much time this season.
Yeah.
Severus comes in with the urgent message. Everyone did captured all of them. Nope. Yeah. So we get a quickie scene with Theon.
Yeah. I feel like, I suppose it's valuable to confirm that he's alive, and establish, set him on his path, which is obviously going to try to be rescuing Yara or something. I mean, I don't want to be too dismissive of it, except that it just feels very transparent as set up for future plot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I felt like this was a wasted scene, but the more I think about it, it might be, and I could be very wrong. So the Krakens, they have the line, what is dead may never die, right? And their baptism is that they drown. They follow the drowned god. They drown and they get resurrected, and that's their whole thing. And so I feel like Theon being fished out of the water could have a significance, but it doesn't feel like it at this point.
Yeah.
And I feel like if it would matter to the Iron Islanders, they would have commented at the time. But I feel like I can't let it go without mentioning, okay, there is that whole drowned god thing going on.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
That's a perfect example, I think, of what I was talking about earlier. And I'm not putting that on you because you're acknowledging that it didn't feel that way in the scene. But I think that's a perfect example of something where we can imagine this cool version of the story where that's the direction they take it, is that, oh, he's plucked out of the water and it's like he's returning from the drowned god, and maybe that he's going to become an avatar of the drowned god or something like that. And that sounds fun and it's exciting to think about, but the scene itself does not support that conclusion.
Yeah. And like I said, it feels like a wasted scene.
Yeah, it does.
It's kind of a callback from, not a callback really, but it reminded me of when Theon, when we first saw him go to the Iron Isles, and he's like, I'm Theon Greyjoy, and everyone's like, so, he just kind of got the same kind of reception, I tried to say, well, if you tried, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose
like,
that if
yeah,
they have more for him later, that we have to establish that he gets out of the water at some point. So I suppose we have to cover that. But other than sort of checking that box, the scene really just, you know, let's have a bunch of Iron Men sailors reinforce the feelings of failure that he feels already.
Right.
I just feel like Theon's a bad penny. He
Mm.
just keeps coming back.
True. It's over to the King's Landing with his uncle parading his treasures through the streets. And
So
Pacey, doing the classic ride into the throne room.
Yes, Pacey's big brother, Euron. He just makes me think that he is misogyny personified.
Yeah,
and it's not really how that. Well, they took two characters and merged them into one for this character, but I don't feel like he's servicing either of those characters.
No,
and
he's very different in the.
He's a whole new character, and it's I don't know. Like, he's got some great lines, but there are times where I'm just like, all right, whatever.
I don't necessarily object to his characterization, though. I think you're right that he's very different.
I'm not objecting. It's just we can't compare.
But he highlights my primary frustration with this episode, which you and I were briefly talking about before we started, which is that the show right now this season is hanging an awful lot of plot weight on Euron's magic fleet that can do anything that it needs to at any given point and zip him around at light speed, whereas everybody else has to follow the rules. And that is like, so basically, like, the only reason Tyrion's plan goes bad is because Euron's magic fleet can take out anyone that it needs to at any given point, while he is apparently in 3 places at once. So that starts to be irritating. And before we started recording, I was actually talking about how just last week I was the one making the case of, you can't harp on that stuff in this show. It's demonstrated time and time again that it's not focusing on maintaining that. But where I can support it when it's in the service of the storytelling. But now it's starting to feel like a crutch.
Yeah. Like
they've given themselves permission to not care about any of that and to just say, oh, well, we need a way to have Dany's allies get taken away. So let's, So this entire fleet that was apparently built in a couple of months is enough to take out the entire rest of the existing fleet in 2 very distant locations within days of each other, while Euron is in King's Landing.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
the greatest captain on the 14 seas. I
mean. Well, that's because he can duplicate himself and his ships, and he can make better ships than all the ones that the Islanders had before. But it's funny because this week, whenever things like that came up, I'm like, nope, time makes no sense. You just got to throw that out the window. It's wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, Game of Thrones. Nothing's going to make sense.
Game of Thrones.
Every time something like that happened, I thought of Christiana, and it's really funny because you're like, okay, come on, now there's just no rules.
I like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I think Paulette came up with that last week.
Yeah, so I actually am kind of enjoying Euron's characterization just in terms of like what kind of guy he seems to be, and specifically how his character is precisely constructed to drive a wedge between Cersei and Jaime.
Oh yeah.
Because Jaime's peril, or the problem that he's in here, that I think could turn into, there's 2 fronts that are driving wedges there. Because obviously he's already highly, conflicted about his feelings about Cersei, right? Like, but for one, the closer she gets to maybe actually really sealing the deal with Euron, that's not going to go over well.
Nope.
But then also, obviously, it's the later scene that introduces another piece of information that could make that really complicated. But for her, the way she pitched it to him previously was more like, oh, we're going to use him and then get rid of him. But now this time it was a little bit more like, oh, sure, we'll do it after the war. And he's kind of already going, oh, no, wait a minute. That's a step beyond what we had said previously. I'm concerned about the direction that this is going. But then again, it's not like he has a better idea, so I don't know.
I don't think she has any intention of following through.
Yeah, that's what my notes say.
Yeah. She's all short-sighted and just now. Viv's comment, I want a penicillin shot just hearing him talk, but he's fantastic, really evil.
That's a good line. I like that. Like I really think that Cersei, she'll promise him whatever, but she's not actually marrying him until later. And honestly, with the things he's saying to Jaime, he is begging Jaime to kill him. He is begging Jaime to kill him.
Yeah.
Let's put another note. Jaime is such an easy mark.
Yeah. See, but that's what I'm talking about when I say that Euron is like, we talked about him not being like in the book. He's a brand new creation, and I feel like that this is a custom Build-A-Bear of a character designed to create conflict between Jaime and Cersei.
Yeah.
That is his function.
Yeah.
And also to be a bad guy for Theon.
I now have fan art in my head. It's Euron, and he's he's got the little Build-A-Bear overalls and the little heart, and there's a
so for him to constantly be provoking Jaime that way, repeatedly, definitely is setting up conflict between the two of them. But he's kind of the magic bullet for Cersei's side right now. And she knows it, and he knows it. And so Jaime, I think, is the one who is seeing down the road, where Cersei is the one saying, oh, sure, yeah, I'll promise him whatever he wants, and I don't have to deliver later. It'll be fine. But that's because that's what she always does. She did the same thing with the Faith Militant. But Jaime is the one who's kind of looking ahead and saying, you don't actually have a plan here. You realize he has got an amazing, super powerful fleet that is hanging out around our coastal city. And you're promising something he really wants and not intending to deliver. How do you think that's going to play out?
Yeah.
Euron could take King's Landing at this point.
You never know. And there was a really great meme that I saw earlier this week, and it was all the various characters with their motivations from season 1 to their motivations now, and they're going through all the different characters, and they're pretty great. But the best is the last one, and it's Jaime. And season 1, I have no problem throwing kids out of windows. Season 7, how am I the sane one here?
Yeah.
How am I the one that can think of plans, and I am the sane one? This makes no sense.
Well, and then at the end of last season, his own kid threw himself out the window. So it's like, he's feeling like, no, I'm no longer needed now. What am I going to do?
I mean,
if throw themselves out windows.
Oh, that's pretty funny. And it never really occurred to me that Tommen went the way that he tried to kill Bran. It never clicked to me that in that way before.
Viv's final note in this scene, Euron takes Yara and leaves Ilaria and her daughter. What's he going to do with Yara?
Torture her.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm worried about that, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah.
Because I definitely think we're setting up. This is Theon's plot, and
Yeah.
I don't
It's
know.
his big
Like at the
moment.
same, but see, that's where I'm conflicted because, like I said, on the one hand, they're constructing everything to sort of want us to kind of root for Theon to get his hero moment or whatever like that. But that's kind of the classic hero fantasy trope that this show has, at least historically, been really interested in subverting and upending. And also, we have to remember, too, that as much as we can hope for Theon to be better moving forward than he was in the past, he's still done some stuff in his life that, like, not that he deserves everything that's happened to him exactly, but make him not exactly like the hero figure of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I think they're pocketing Yara away for Theon to attempt rescue.
Yeah.
I guess so. I don't care. I really don't care about those two.
No,
I enjoy watching Euron. At this point, I do not care. There were a couple of scenes with Yara that I enjoyed last season and then last episode, but right now I'm like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, well, it's frustrating that she's just been relegated to being prisoner and to be rescued now. So
yeah, she was so amazing, and it's
well,
just like
and
that's
I guess
yeah.
in fairness to that show, Yara was really never as cool as Book Asha anyway. So
this is very true. She's always been a disappointment to me.
Yeah. No, I mean I'm invested, but warily because I am concerned that the show is not going to deliver on that particular investment. So we'll see. We'll see.
I think that's why I'm not invested. Is I don't want to put any care into that character. But if we're moving on to
Paulette says, I'm so done with Theon, they could have left him on that log for the rest of the show. And that just made me think that what if he bumped into Gendry?
Right.
I did see a meme of that. It was Theon on a boat with Gendry. That was hysterical. But I want to see Gendry. I don't care about Theon. All right. So Cersei's vengeance?
Yeah.
What are your guys' thoughts on this?
On the one hand, it feels honestly a little bit elaborate for Cersei. But what I'm curious about is that on the one hand, it does seem like a really sort of devious, poetic revenge thing to kind of try to do. And it does seem like it would be very traumatic. It also technically leaves the scene with both the daughter and the mother still alive, with us knowing that it could take days for the daughter to die, and all that needs to happen is for her to drink this little bit of an antidote and then she'd be fine. So I don't know that the show is trying to set us up that they're going to be okay or they're going to get away. But what I guess I'm saying is that it's a definitively not final scene. So I don't know if the show is trying to suggest to us that there might be more to that story, or if they're really trying to just sort of close the book on that, like little, Tales from the Crypt episode. Right. You know what I mean? Like, we have Cersei and talking with the Crypt Keeper afterwards. It's like, they'll pay with the poetic vengeance of what they did.
My only note for the scene,
by the way, because Tales from the Crypt was an HBO show.
There you go. My only note for the scene was dark. And my assumption was, we'll never see them again.
Yeah.
So my thoughts on this scene are, I actually really enjoyed it because I kept thinking, all right, where is she going? Where is she going? And I feel like Cersei has channeled a couple of people here. One of which is she's channeled a bit of Joffrey. She's coming up with ways of torture in the way that Joffrey would have. And I don't think that she would have had that before. So I agree
Yeah.
with you. It's very complicated for Cersei, but I think because of all that she's lost, she's holding on to her children the only way she can. And this is one of them. I don't think it's a conscious thing. There's definitely some Joffrey going on. She is a monster.
Yeah. I had not made that connection, but you are totally right.
And so one of the other things I kept thinking about is her wig is so bad. It is so bad. But it made me think, I wouldn't be surprised if Cersei's hair continues to grow and she wears a wig, constantly a short wig, to keep that role of the wounded mother who lost everything and this vengeful queen, because she did wear wigs in the beginning. Now, again, this is putting more into it. It's probably just bad wigs on the show like they've been doing, but it just really, I don't know. It was interesting to me. And again, her hair is kind of like Joffrey's. And I understand her vengeance. I understand this James Bond death trap that she set up.
Yeah.
Because she really wants people to feel the pain that she has been given.
Right.
And she's a villain, but I'm totally there. I'm like, all right, I see where you're going. You're a monster. This is awesome.
Well, this is one of those rare occasions that puts us in her shoes a little bit, just because although we could understand why Ilaria wanted revenge with Oberyn's death, she's actually kind of way off base here, because first of all, Oberyn died in a fair fight to the death that he took on voluntarily and only lost because of his own dumb macho posturing.
Yep.
And in retaliation, she murdered an innocent child.
And did exactly the opposite of what Oberyn would have wanted.
Yeah, so Ilaria is not like the hero in this scene that's being tortured by the villain. She's kind of a villain in her own right that just happened to fall on the other side. And so Cersei, not that we would ever quite say that this is a righteous act. It's certainly a fulfillment of legitimate vengeance.
Right.
You can understand her. You can definitely relate to her. The only person I really feel bad for is, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Tyann or whatever her name is, the Sand Snake. Because and everything in the scene, again, like most of this episode, everything was so well acted, everything was so well done.
Yeah.
From the moment Cersei kisses her, she goes, "Mama," and she knows right away she's been poisoned. So I don't know if she's just predicting behavior, if she can taste the poison because it's a poison that they use. I mean, she used it on Bronn. The fact that she's the one that used it on Bronn is, and all of this other stuff. It's oh man, it just strikes you, the whole thing. And just the acting from the face acting that was going on.
Oh yeah, it's
blew me away.
And it's such a creepy fate, that idea of if you refuse to eat, we're gonna force feed you while you just sit down here and watch your daughter rot away across the room from you. That's, oh my God.
Yeah. And that there will be no way out of this. There's no sense of will or constitution that is going to save you from this fate. They are going to force you. They're going to make sure you see everything. It's pretty sick.
Yeah. I will say that I think that if the show intended this to be the final fate of those characters, that they're not going to return, I think the show could have communicated that better. Because where it's left right now is that it could take days for her to die. We just saw Cersei take, now I'm fine.
Yeah.
And then leaving them with the door closed, both still alive. Now, I mean, I don't know what I think they should have done necessarily, but right now it seems like they completely have the door open for both of those characters to be rescued.
Yeah. Although, I mean,
hey, we thought they
wrote
not
the door working after a certain amount of time, but
yeah. Sorry. We thought they wrote the Dorn plot off before, so
Hmm.
we have no way of knowing, you know.
True.
Yep.
True. Yeah.
Well, it
And
does
then-
raise the question too, though, just of I mean, the whole idea was that they were taking the fleet down to Dorne to get the army.
Yeah.
So presumably the army is still down there. And
Mhm.
even if Hilaria, the current ruler, has been taken out, we can imagine there'd be some chaos. But there's still a lot of people down there who, in theory, were already kind of ready to be transported. And if they hear, "Oh no, our leader was taken," that doesn't seem like that is realistic to say, okay, they're just off the board now. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's made even deeper, darker, more diabolical by how hot she gets,
Ugh.
and immediately goes in
And
Yeah.
takes on Jamie.
I'm so uncomfortable by this scene.
Mm.
The way she coerces him into sex, and like they had to add the slurping noises.
Yeah.
But one thing that was interesting is, remember I said she was channeling Tommen? Well, now she's kind of channeling the Mad King.
Mm.
Because, and I don't think this was said in the show. So again, this could just be me book fan adding things in. It was said that the Mad King was only ever aroused after he tortured people.
Mm.
And
Oh wow.
I mean, I think that's in line with what we've heard about the Mad King in
Yeah.
the show, but I don't think we've ever that
Yeah.
sounds plausible, but I don't think they've covered that exactly.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, to be sure, Cersei is kind of drunk on power at this point.
have we even seen her drink wine?
Yeah, she poured wine when she was meeting with the banker.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she's definitely. Well, and I mean, to be fair, too, in terms of the broader plot, she's kind of winning right now. Like, she took what looked like a dire situation and has almost entirely. Well, okay, I take that back, because I was going to say she's almost entirely reversed it, but it's really not that, because what she's really doing is she's just making it so that Dany has few options other than killing thousands of people with dragons and sending Dothraki into King's Landing.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not so much that she is actually succeeding in winning a war for good as much as she is forcing Dany's hand in a way that will be kind of unsatisfactory
To everybody.
But yeah.
Most likely. Viv's note about Cersei now not giving fucks about anybody knowing she's getting it on with her brother, that the servant is the same one that Cersei's had in previous years, now with her hair cut short like Cersei.
Yeah.
I wrote a note about that.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
She always matched her haircuts through the years. I had not noticed at all in the slightest.
I made a note I didn't notice in the past, but I made a note that the page has the same exact haircut as Cersei. Is that going to be a thing? Which is what made me think that, she could do the whole wig thing. And like I said, reading way too much into it.
Well, I didn't get the impression that there was any show wig, meaning like in story that she's wearing a wig.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the way I read that is, it's not that Cersei's hair hasn't grown. She is keeping it short because that's how she wants it now.
Yeah.
And that style is being reflected by people around her.
Yeah. So that's definitely a pretty big thing. So Paulette says, not to foreshadow too much, but Jamie is on his way home after a poisoning. He might step in on another poisoning.
Well, especially, we haven't talked about that scene yet, but like he's got a whole new sort of take on poisoning and how he feels about that and so on.
Yep. Yeah. So the next scene is with Mycroft.
It is.
Did I notice that before? Because I feel like this is the first time I've noticed that the banker from the Iron Bank is Mycroft.
Well, it hasn't showed up recently.
Yeah, I don't remember if you had called him out before, but
I feel like the last time we saw him was season 5.
Yeah, and maybe because there's been new Sherlock since then. I've noticed. But all I could see is I'm like, it's Mycroft. It's Mycroft. Why is Mycroft? Well, that makes sense that he would work for the Iron Bank.
This scene, I felt like this is another scene that I don't want to say it was not a wasted scene, but I feel like its function for the storytelling was pretty transparent, and it was kind of a long scene for fulfilling that function, which is to have Cersei make what seems to be a crazy, unfulfillable promise, which is to hang out for 2 weeks and I'll pay you back all the gold, despite not having left any, and that seeming like, what? And then for her to actually be, able to do that.
Yep.
So I didn't really get much out of the scene except from the perspective of first time through having her promise to repay all that gold in 2 weeks. And I'm like, wait, what? What is the plan there? That seems okay. I'm confused.
Right.
And when it happens, you're like, oh, of course. Why wouldn't anybody do that? But
more magic, more logistics, where they're able to take a giant castle without a siege.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's wonderful. All you have to do is march up to a castle, right? That's how you win.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it also seems that the Iron Bank actually cares who runs Westeros at this point. Like, whereas in the past it's always been asking for more money and things like that, they've never gone to say, well, we want this side to win. It's always been, like Davos went and said, well, this is why you should back us. So it feels like the Iron Bank is playing a little more of an active role in this.
I kind of took it as these are the machinations that happen that we just were never privy to.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, they played an active role in helping Stannis, right? I mean, that's how he paid for the ships that took him up to help Jon.
Yeah, but Davos had to go there to get them to agree. Like, they didn't come and say, hey, Stannis, we want to back you.
Yeah.
And they never came and said, hey, Stannis, you haven't paid us.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think that this was not, hey, Cersei, we want to back you. It was more like, hey, Cersei, you already owe us a lot of money. What's your plan here?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not getting another loan.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think the real purpose of this scene, though, is just to have her make what seems like a crazy promise that she wouldn't have any way to deliver on, and yet.
Right. First, we take a detour back to Tyrion and Jon. Was very happy to see that they were going to get a moment.
Yeah.
And Jon broods better.
Well, it's kind of reminiscent of their last meeting too, standing on top of the wall, being up on that cliff. And I love too how Jon, despite liking Tyrion is just really not in the mood for banter.
Right.
And so, Tyrion's up there when he kind of makes his cracks about, oh, you look better brooding than me. And Jon is just like, I'm a prisoner in this castle. Why do you think that I want to talk about anything other than that?
Right. I don't want to play word games.
Yeah.
Shut up.
But yeah, I love that. I love that scene.
One of the lines that I really enjoyed was, people's minds aren't made for problems that large. It's easier to deal with Cersei. And I think that's very true about a lot of things. I mean, in the show and in real life. I mean, so many times you hear people say, well, you're going to squabble over this, but what about this other thing? And a lot of times this other thing, it's too big for us to think about. So we have to focus on the things that are smaller.
Yeah. I think that's where a
true.
lot of like climate change denial comes from.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
First thing that
idea
popped in my head.
Yeah.
So I really liked how Tyrion was kind of leading Jon through the game. You know,
Hmm.
that was a ridiculous thing to ask.
Yeah.
You have something else you want?
Yeah. I'm trying to find a way for you guys to stop ruining everything for everyone else.
It was
Yeah.
it was so great. It was like a mentorship, you know?
Yeah. I'm a little worried on Tyrion's behalf, though, and this is actually more speculation about next time, given everything that happens this time. But with both the loss of the fleet and then having the whole plan to take Casterly Rock go so bad, and I feel like what has happened here is we remember Olenna's conversation with Dany and that whole thing of like ignore the clever men and be a dragon. I feel like the show is setting up that Tyrion's clever plan is failing and that she should just be a dragon, so to speak. Which, I mean, it's fine if that's the story they want to tell, but I just feel bad for Tyrion because his clever plan is failing because of plot shenanigans, not because it was actually a bad plan.
Agreed. It was a good plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now that said, I mean it's fair to be outmaneuvered. Like the whole thing with actually leaving the Lannisters, abandoning Casterly Rock and doing this bold, audacious move that Tyrion fails to foresee because the idea that the Lannisters would abandon Casterly Rock.
Right.
He's too caught up in the idea that he's going to take Casterly Rock, a place that's never been taken, and it's his home, and he's going to seize his birthright and all of that stuff. And the idea that they would just leave it behind to move over and do, and specifically referencing that's just what Robb did to me in Whispering Wood. It's great callback. So that one I don't mind so much. What does bug me is Euron's magic fleet managing to also take out that part of the.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be one thing if they showed up and they're like, there's not enough people here. And we didn't have Euron's fleet showing up.
Yeah. I think they should have just left out that piece of it.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, the idea that, now they're going to have to march all the way back across Westeros. I'm thinking like, well, that only seems like a big deal because you're already completely underselling how long it would take to sail ships all the way around the southern tip of Westeros, which is what they would have had to do to get there. Because you're talking about opposite sides of this long, thin continent. They have to go all the way down around the south to get there, as opposed to marching across this relatively narrow continent.
Yeah, like there are times that sailing is faster and times when it's not, but they're using it like this fleet is a TARDIS, But let's see if I can get this voice right. If only he'd known about the magic maniac's mythical armada.
Well, I guess the 1,000 ships, I guess they just split it. And took
and
at the same
infinite
time.
replicating Kraken ships because
right.
Exactly. They just make more as they go. Like nanobots.
Well, and we definitely are meant to know what has happened by having them show that flagship of Euron's fleet there at Casterly Rock also, despite it having been part of the fleet and presumably the ship that Euron was on when it took Yara and the Sand Snakes, which was all the way on the other side of the continent. And then Euron himself goes to King's Landing. Right. And all of this, at least in show field time, taking place over a couple of days max.
We call shenanigans.
Yeah, there's some serious shenanigans there, but anyway, I mean, obviously, though, I think what's happening is I feel like it's a little bit of a clumsy setup, but the goal, of course, is to just have Dany's seemingly unstoppable force get winnowed down until she's going to be forced to make a tough call, which is good storytelling. I just feel like the way they're getting there is a little clumsy.
Yeah.
Paulette also
Absolutely.
says, by the way, the Unsullied marching east and the Dothraki marching west, with Jamie in the middle, is called a pincer movement.
Mhm. Yeah.
Go to Danny and John talking.
Mhm.
Much different conversation than in the throne room, certainly, with them being alone and
Yeah.
having.
One thing before we get there, when
Yeah.
Tyrion's talking to Danny,
Mhm.
I really do love how she brings up what was that bit about him being stabbed in the heart,
Mhm.
and
Right.
and Tyrion just sloughs it off, and he's like, "You must give them their flights of fancy. It's dreary in the north."
Yeah.
That, and he tries to pass off his own wisdom again, and then he's like, "I wouldn't do that."
Well, and I'm
You?
also
You.
yeah, that's pretty good.
I totally did.
I want to just kind of also though maybe I'm not calling shenanigans, but I'm raising an eyebrow at the idea that you're talking about fighting an army of the dead, but
Mhm.
surely this example of accidentally mentioning that maybe he's been killed and come back from the dead, it's just figure of speech for sure.
I don't
No,
think Tyrion thinks it's a figure of speech. My belief is that Tyrion is like, yeah, there's more there. I don't want to know. That's a big problem.
Mhm. Yeah. I don't
Something
know.
we need to be concerned with right now.
If we don't talk
Honestly,
about it, I don't have to deal with it.
I wouldn't be surprised if the show at this point kind of want to just forget that happened, that John
Right.
came back from the dead, and just kind of move on and not actually have it come up again in any meaningful way. That's kind
Wouldn't
of
be
the impression I
surprised.
get, honestly, because they're definitely avoiding some of the obvious story ramifications that it seems like it ought to have had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So-
anyway,
John and Danny.
And great exchange. Oh, I lost my note. We all enjoy what we're good at. John, I don't.
yeah,
Yes.
that's a great exchange.
I love that exchange. And that comes back to, remember I said people followed John because they love him.
Hmm.
Both of those things, people follow him because they love him, and I don't enjoy doing the thing I'm good at, are two things that were said of Rhaegar. Rhaegar was very good at killing, but he didn't enjoy it.
Hmm.
People followed
Oh,
him
yeah.
because they believed in him.
Hmm.
And
See?
they're
Wow.
directly tied to things that were said in the show.
Yeah.
That
What screen caps out
you
there.
know what? Like that one, I'm gonna give some legit. I don't know why the metaphor that came to mind was that I was giving you legit breadcrumbs there, but yeah. So let me dwell on that just to kind of clarify what I'm trying to mean here is that I think a lot of some of these theories I feel like get pulled out of thin air. But that one I feel like is potentially legitimate. There is that there's something real there. You're not there's
I'm not grasping at straws.
so the crumbs are evidence that there was actually bread there at some time, as opposed to anyway.
Just believing that there was bread. So the other thing
Breadcrumbs.
that makes this very important to me is how important Rhaegar and stories of Rhaegar have been to Daenerys. She was always asking Jorah to tell her about Rhaegar. She named one of her dragons Rhaegar. She's never met him, but he's always been a powerful influence in her life. So I think it's really interesting that, John, who's a lot like Ned, is also a lot like Rhaegar. And it's coming out in this first meeting with Daenerys.
I think that's really cool. Though she did name one after Viserion, and he was a dick.
Yeah, but
She sold her.
even though he
sold
abused her,
he was
kept
still
her
her
alive.
brother, and it's like I have a third dragon. I gotta name him something, I guess.
Yeah.
But
They can't all be
Or
Drogo.
break the theme.
do you think that we're gonna get ever to see flashback Rhaegar maybe in one of Bran's three-eyed raven dreams or something?
I hope so.
Because how else would we ever actually end up confirming the whole Jon Snow's parentage thing? Wouldn't we have to see Rhaegar at some point?
Especially if he's cast as Kit Harington.
Oh, that would be fun. Kit Harington with like contacts and a little lighter hair. I would love to see a flashback with Rhaegar, and there is a certain tourney that I would love to see as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Marco says no one can match the Dothraki in an open field. Barristan Selmy said that to Danny. So
Yeah.
that's
So yeah, I mean, this comes back to the idea that Cersei isn't so much winning as much as forcing Dany's hand, because Dany brought the Unsullied and the Dothraki, but she's been reluctant to use them in King's Landing specifically because of concern that the Westerosi would see her as a foreign invader instead of the rightful ruler.
Yeah.
But if Cersei successfully takes away everyone except the Unsullied and the Dothraki, then Dany's not going to just go home or turn around and go back to Essos.
Agreed.
She kind of burned that bridge, actually, so that doesn't.
I like at the end there, with all of John's brooding and nobody's believing me. So you believe me? And she won't say.
Yeah,
better get going. You got work to do.
I love it.
Well, it's this weird thing, though, that the tick that the show has had ever since Ygritte, that everyone needs to use Jon Snow's whole name every time they talk to him. You have work to do, Jon Snow.
It's like Jordan Catalano.
That was a verbal tick that was distinctive dialogue for Ygritte as a specific character, and now just everybody talks that way whenever they talk to Jon.
That's because he's like Jordan Catalano, it's always two names. So I just about lost it because Paulette writes in the chat, face it, this is HBO. Rhaegar would be butt naked in front of Lyanna. So yeah, there'll be no questions if we do see Rhaegar. And Paulette, I really hope that's what we see. That would be awesome. A little three-eyed raven sex position, sure.
Why not?
I think.
Any other thoughts on Dany and Jon?
No.
Fly over to Winterfell. Sansa handily administrating.
Yep, she's letting on that she's smarter than she had previously let on.
Yes.
Oh yeah, she is the boss. She is the tallest one there. But you can't help but notice how tall she is in this scene.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just say Baelish gives a lesson in quantum living.
Yeah. He kind of tells her to live like the three-eyed raven.
Yeah, and it's especially he says that right before Bran shows up too. Honestly, this is the first time where I was really thinking Littlefinger is actually the one in over his head here at this point. I'm thinking, because I had always kind of for the longest time been thinking, oh yeah, Sansa is actually pretty smart, but she's up against kind of this scheming master here. But I'm increasingly starting to think of Littlefinger as someone whose obsession with Sansa has led him to make decision after decision that are not in his own best interests, to the point where he is kind of stuck now in not a good space, because she is really not bending to his pressure at all. And every attempt that he makes to try to re-ingratiate himself is getting just completely blown off. And this whole lesson of, oh, you have to be aware of everything. I feel like the obvious response to that is I should be aware of how you're a super creep who's going to try to get in my head about everything. Maybe because that's what you've done every second of the day since I've met you.
Sansa has no fucks to give. She is not taking any of his shit, and I love it. I think my favorite part is when he goes, "No one here knows Cersei better than me," and she's like,
yes.
No.
That was so perfect that when he says that, and she's just like, "That's not true. What are you talking about?"
Yeah, that was brilliant. But during his little speech, it seemed, I don't know, she had a weird look on her face, like she was kind of entranced by it. But
Well, I think that he was presenting it in a different way, but and I could see her listening, because I definitely think she is smart enough to recognize that she can learn things from him, but with enough of a reserve to not let him in. Now, that said, the dangerous thing and the risk that she takes with him is that he is obsessed to the point where if pressed enough, he will do something desperate.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be dangerous.
Yeah.
Because he's not going to give up. I mean, he has hitched his wagon to her star, so to speak, and is not going to go anywhere, right? So he is not, just going to ever give up and say, oh, well, I guess I'll go back to the Erie and just hang out there. No.
Yeah. As long as they need the army, they need him. So there's always a chance. Keep
pressing until someone is tired of his pressing and pushes back, and then he's potentially going to do something dangerous. Is what I'm predicting at this point.
Or we have another prediction from a listener. Mark the Incaffeinated One posted earlier this week. He's like, so when Arya returns to Winterfell and takes Littlefinger's face, and it solves two problems, right?
I can see that, although at the same time, there's no story resonance in having Arya kill Littlefinger. No, like they don't care about it.
It's a fun idea.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to kill him. She just needs his face.
Yeah.
Sansa can kill him.
Well, it depends. Does she know about him being involved in the assassination attempt on Bran? Might drive her to kill him.
But even that, there's not established in the show any particular, there's no poetry in that.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
That's a recurring theme, by the way. Old plot points, when we get to it's like nobody cares about that anymore.
Honestly, Sansa is really the only one with the sufficient emotional investment to really get some sort of a narrative payoff from the end of Littlefinger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Like, oh, someone's at the gate. All I could think. Arya? My first thought was it would be Arya.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know she's on her way. Yeah. That's the last we saw her is at the end of the crossroads heading north, right? Or no, I guess, on her way north with the wolves was the last we saw her, but on her way to Winterfell was in theory where she was going.
Right.
But yeah, so for Bran to show up, Mark in the chat says Bran that we know is gone in that cave. He's like supernatural being now, just Bran's body, but three-eyed raven inside. I don't know if I would go that far, but he's certainly not himself. And the way I described it on Twitter, the way he comes across to me, which, briefly stepping into a meta position, I'm not sure I feel like is a good storytelling choice to have him act like this, but regardless, they've made that choice. But in the show, what it comes across to me is not someone who's necessarily emotionless so much as distracted. It's like when someone's trying to read a book while they talk to you. That's what it felt like to me, is that their attention is divided. And so, and people, I talked to a bunch of people who got kind of hung up on the idea that it's super creepy that he brings up her rape. And I'm like, well, that's kind of not exactly what happened. I mean, because he mentioned bad stuff happened to her here, which is certainly true, and could refer to the rape, but is not very specific. But then the moment that he calls out is not the time that he raped you. It was how beautiful you looked standing here in front of this tree with the snow falling just like it is now. That's the image that he brings up. And so certainly we can understand why that would remind her of what happened next. And that was such an emotionally fraught moment for her. But I don't feel like that I wouldn't call that him bringing up, hey, remember that time you got raped.
Agreed. I agree 100% that you said exactly my thoughts there.
Okay, cool.
And for the whole idea of Bran being different, it's still Bran, but it's like he's taken the three-eyed raven into him. And so he like if we're gonna say like souls or spirits or whatever it is, those two things have combined and they're sharing that body. You know, it's he's still Bran, but he's also the three-eyed raven.
See, that's different than my take on it. I don't get the impression that the previous three-eyed raven as a being has merged with Bran. It's more like Bran has inherited the abilities. And Bran is still Bran. He is not the previous three-eyed raven in a new body. It's just that Bran now has the ability to see all these visions constantly all the time, and it's distracting. I think that's the impression that I get, is that he is kind of lost in constantly seeing all of these different things, and it's given him a different perspective, and he's kind of thinking about 100 things at once while he's having this conversation. I did not get any impression that it is literally a case of like merging souls or something.
Well, it's more like, for me, spirit, is not exactly soul. It's, like Blood Raven is gone. I think that soul or whatever is gone. But whatever it is that is the three-eyed raven, this intangible thing, I think goes from body to body.
Yeah, but I think of that almost more like the metaphorical, who's king, right? It's like it's inherited and you have power and authority as a result, but it doesn't make one person into another person. It is, an expansion of who they were, not that's kind of how it feels to me. It's like this ability has moved from one to another, not the identity.
Yeah. Okay.
That's how it felt to me, but it's definitely, as Bran himself points out, it's kind of hard to explain.
Yeah, it's complicated. Right. So Bran says he needs to speak to Jon, and I just went, oh crap, Bran's gonna die.
Right. Need to tell him something.
Anytime someone has to tell Jon who his parents are, they die.
The thing that leapt out at me, honestly, though, from that scene is Sansa saying, "Your father's last trueborn son, that makes you Lord of Winterfell now." And I'm thinking, whoa, hold on a minute. That's a very complicating factor. And I mean, it's not untrue exactly, but you need to probably be careful of what you're saying about that when Jon is down in the South. Like, are you proposing that Bran is now going to try to take over as King of the North? Or are you saying that Bran is going to be Lord of Winterfell while Jon is still King in the North? What is it you're saying exactly?
Yeah.
And of course, he just kind of brushes that off of like, oh, I'm not going to be Lord of anything. I'm the three-eyed raven now. And which, I mean, we could see that, but I was a little surprised that that's kind of, it's one thing for her to sort of realize that complicates the succession thing. But for her to say it matter-of-factly, like, well, obviously that means you are the Lord of Winterfell now, as opposed to kind of saying, hey, we've kind of got this complicated thing happening right now, so let's figure out what that means in a way that hopefully will not disrupt everything.
Yeah, I felt like in this scene, and it's probably because of the blocking. So in the previous scene, as I said, Sansa had no fucks to give. She was boss. She was taller than everybody. In this scene, she's sitting like a little girl with knees to her chest, and she's very soft. And I feel like when she said, well, your father's last trueborn son, that means you're Lord of Winterfell. She's not even thinking of King of the North. She's not thinking of anything. She's kind of reverted back to that childlike state.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be interesting to see where this goes, because bringing Bran back is changing a lot of things.
Yeah, that was exactly my take. Kind of a regression a little bit, that she just kind of blurts that out. And where that'll go.
Well, it also.
sorry,
go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish up.
I was just going to say, it kind of highlights another thing that the show has kind of brushed past a little bit, which is maybe fine in saying that it's the Northerners brushing past it, which is this kind of Jon's is he a Stark or is he not really a Stark? You know what I mean? It's like if they've decided he's king in the North, but how much of that is predicated on, well, he is technically Ned Stark's son. And, you know, it's like, so the idea, if there was actually a competition in as far as that goes, are they following Jon or are they following a Stark in Winterfell?
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Bran is utterly disinterested in trying to have a, you know, inheritance war with Jon, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We shall see.
Vivid grabbed a meme picture. See if it actually opens the scene or opens in here correctly. Wow. Nothing happened, did it?
Nope.
Of course not.
Oh, there we go.
Well, you need to make yourself the director, because otherwise, if either of us talks, it makes this.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, gotcha.
So it's
well. But so yeah, it's I mean,
Jon.
Stark reunion. Be like, Jon, I died, came back to life. Bran, I'm the three-eyed raven. Arya, I can change faces. And Sansa, what the fuck, guys?
I feel like I can change faces undersells what Arya. I feel like the meme would have been better with her saying, like, I'm a shape-shifting assassin.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. We're already running long. We have a lot left to talk about.
Actually, we already touched on
through my notes.
We haven't talked about Sam. We haven't talked about Jaime and Olenna.
That's next.
Yeah.
That's next.
Or yeah. It's
Straight
just, we've got a lot, and I'm late, and I'm tired.
Straight to Old Town. Jorah's cured. It's as simple as
fast.
The next morning. And it is established in the show that it would have had to be the next morning, because Jorah was only going to be allowed to stay in that room for one extra day, because it was specifically for the person of allowing him to kill himself.
You're right. Yeah. I kept thinking it had to take weeks.
It only makes sense to take weeks, except that the show previously established that Sam had to do it that night because it was the last night that he was going to be allowed to stay, and that he was going to be shipped off in the morning. He's staying one extra day as a privilege of being a knight, that he gets this extra day where he's left to his own devices, right? Which is a wink, wink.
Right.
You can kill yourself if you want, instead of going off to be with the Stone Men. But it was made clear you're going to be shipped off tomorrow.
Yeah, that makes it even worse.
Yeah.
Like, I'm happy it happened, but at the same time,
it's just another perfect example of the show really just doing whatever.
Yeah.
Like, but it's not even internally consistent, though. That's what's starting to be frustrating about it, is that it's one thing to just kind of say, yeah, we can fudge the travel time to service the story, but they didn't. It was them that established that he was going to be shipped off in the next day. Like, they built that into their own episode, and then, you know, like they didn't have to say, you know, they were just trying to put time pressure on why Sam has to do it right away. But now that just means that, like, you know, after that whole thing where we're seeing pus and, you know, pulling off this skin in the middle of the night, and he's screaming, but, you know, in the morning, nope, fine. It's all scarred over and healed and everything already.
It was the climate.
Yeah. I did like that bit, though.
It was great because he's just sitting there trying to come up with answers. He's like, the rest? Sam's like, but climate? Sam's like, what? You suck at this, man.
Yeah.
I did like the follow-up, though, of the Archmaester basically saying, I forbade you to do it in the way that you forbid a child from running into the street without looking, because it was dangerous and I thought you were being foolhardy. But in this case, you saved a man's life by apparently being incredibly meticulous and disciplined and careful, which speaks well to your abilities. And so even though you disobeyed me, you have accomplished a pretty incredible thing. So good job. I liked that. But also it's like, but I didn't forget the part where you disobeyed me. So that's not going away.
How did you accomplish such a feat? I read the books and followed the instructions.
I feel like, he's like, what, you wanted a reward? And I'm like, wait, you just gave him a reward. He's getting to copy these ancient texts and scrolls that are going to be destroyed if somebody, so they're so old that they're about to be destroyed, and he gets to copy them over, which is knowledge, which is like the best gift you could give to Sam, and will likely be something that he can use.
And
I think that's a stretch. That feels like a stretch to me.
at the least, it's going to cut into his chamber pot scrubbing time.
Yeah. Okay, so that's
really
true.
A promotion.
But so this is I don't want to like rain on your parade exactly there, Nettie, but it's kind of like we were talking about with the Theon scene. To me, is that it would be one thing to say, wouldn't it be an interesting storytelling direction to go? The idea that, oh, well, there's actually going to be something super valuable in these specific documents that he's going to discover by copying, and then somehow the Archmaester is like doing that deliberately. But like, I don't feel like it feels like that in the scene. In the scene, it feels like he's saying, nope, this is your punishment. Mm-hmm. And Sam does not look happy about it.
Right. This goes back to the whole, like, when the Archmaester tells him not to do something, whether or not the Archmaester thinks he's actually going to listen to him or not is one thing. I don't think that the Archmaester is saying, oh, I'm going to reward this kid with ancient texts.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, oh, he's got attention to detail. I'm going to have him copy over these texts. I need them exactly right. But for Sam individually, the one thing that we know about Sam is that all he ever wants to do is read. And when he was in his father's house, he would get in trouble for constantly reading. When he was at the wall, all he wanted to do was read and learn things. So Sam is not only going to be reading and learning things, he's going to be transcribing them, which means he's going to be committing them to memory. He is going to be sitting here and learning from these texts. So whether or not the Archmaester meant it as a reward, it's a reward for Sam because of who he is.
But it doesn't play like that in the scene,
I guess. I don't know.
I make a compelling argument, except that Sam does seem disheartened and
yes, Sam does seem away, but I'm talking about like the overarching reality of the situation. I'm imagining Sam going home to Gilly and, hey, guess what I learned while I was transcribing today,
Yeah, well, and that's possible. I just
Briar Rabbin in it.
I feel like it's it's easy to sort of go beyond explanations that are presented in the scene, because I again, it kind of ties into what we were talking about with the stealing the restricted books, and is like, oh, was the Archmaester really going wink wink, but I know you're going to do it anyway? And I'm sort of just feeling like, what reason does the Archmaester have to do that? If the Archmaester is actually okay with him reading those books, then why would he not just let him do it? And instead of having to force him to disobey a direct order, but with a wink, like I can't think of any reason for him to act that way. Whereas in this case, I think you're right that you're not saying that the Archmaester is doing it like with any sort of like mischievous intent, as much as just like, no, these are actually the papers writing. They need to be transcribed.
Yeah.
Period.
I do like when Sam left Jorah, the fleshy handshake.
Yeah, that was
how much Jorah needed something like that, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool.
Although technically, Jorah's right hand was not the one that was infected, but anyways.
Yeah, but it's the first time he's touched someone, and who knows how long he's been there because of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Let's head back to Dragonstone.
Yeah.
See, Danny just wants to hunt down the fleet.
Yeah.
And I really like how they did the Battle of Castor Rock, and that
Yeah,
you know it's Tyrion describing it and showing the things, and
definitely agree. I liked all of that.
It makes no sense for Tyrion to be explaining the plan at that moment, like after everything's in place, but it works really well for that montage. And I love that Tyrion has JFK tunnels into Casterly Rock.
the sewers.
That's kind of perfect.
Yeah. I will. This is a minor nitpick, because the whole idea that Tyrion was in charge of the sewers is a callback to, you know, previously established information in the show. I mean, he had talked about that to Varys. I think that or was it Ned? I don't remember. He talked to someone about having been put in charge of the sewers by Tywin.
Mhm.
I don't remember who at this point, but I feel like it was Varys. But anyway, so that bears out. But the impression that I had previously was not that I constructed the sewers, because apparently me and my father were there while this whole castle was being constructed. Like, I don't feel like that was quite what was previously established. I mean, Tywin didn't build Casterly Rock, did he?
Yeah, he did.
Really?
Yeah, I believe, and I could be 100% wrong, but I believe it's actually talked about because that the Lannisters didn't used to be a big house, and that's been one of their failings as one of the great houses, is because they're actually a relatively new house, and the only thing that brought them into prominence is they found gold in their area, and they mined the gold, and like, sorry, Chooch, but you must have been going crazy with all the Reigns of Castamere playing in this episode. But that was written about Tywin.
Right.
So that explains, you know, the Lannisters always pay their debts, the Reigns of Castamere. This is all new history.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, ancestral history where all the other houses are relying on, you know, the Starks. It's like Bran the Builder and all of these ancient Starks, and we were kings and all of this other stuff. Whereas the Lannisters, they're a fairly new house, and yeah, I'm pretty sure they did.
I Googled it.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
okay.
According to tradition, the castle was originally held by House Casterly, the old kings of the Rock, and they were hoodwinked into giving the Rock to Lan the Clever, a legendary trickster and ancestor of House Lannister thousands of years ago.
Oh, wow.
And so that does not. So maybe Tywin made substantial renovations, and
okay, then maybe that's what
retrofitting, yeah.
But
Kind of modernized.
The castle predated Tywin, is what I was feeling.
Okay. Then I was remembering it wrong.
That's all right. I mean, because it's confusing when it's made to sound in this episode like, oh yeah, when my dad was building this castle, he had me build the sewers, and I built this tunnel, and I'm sort of feeling like, was that previously established? But okay, sure.
Right.
Anyway, I loved all the scene, and like that's world building, nitpicking stuff. But in general, the existence of the tunnel, the whole plan, loved all of that stuff.
Yeah. And Tyrion quotes Bronn.
Yeah.
Give me 10 good men.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'll impregnate the bitch.
Yeah.
When, of course, we already talked about what happens to.
Yeah. I you know, we kind of covered it already, but I definitely sort of feel like I think I would have been happier if Euron's fleet didn't show up there, and it was just a case of we committed all of our ships to sailing all the way around the southern end of this continent to bring the Unsullied there, and it's going to take them forever to get back, or they could march back, which would also take forever. But it turned out that the Lannister army was gone, and there wasn't a need to have Euron's fleet be everywhere that way.
Yeah.
I felt that was piling on to the point where it starts becoming kind of Game of Thrones-y.
Yeah.
Gamey Thronies. Yeah, so that I feel like was an unnecessary addition, and the scene would have worked just as well, if not better, just without that piece of it. to have Grey Worm having, they've taken the castle, but he's looking around and it's deserted and just saying, the bulk of the Lannister forces were supposed to be here. What is going on? And then we cut to Highgarden. Like, I feel like that works just as well.
Yeah. Lannisters marching on Highgarden, which is a bunch of bullshit. Well, really quick, one thing. So I saw that Papa Tarly was there. I didn't notice if any of the other houses. I guess it doesn't really matter. It just bugs me, the bullshit of, in the past they've said the Tyrells had the second largest army.
Yeah.
And they have a defended fortified castle, and it's been well established they have all the fucking food.
But
so this is a classic siege situation. There's no way the Lannisters are just marching in and taking Highgarden.
But they got the
passing it off as, we were never really good at battle. But that's just, it's the whole
Nettie
thing.
has the answer.
Go ahead.
They, in the last episode, they got the Tarleys and I can't remember the other house, but they got the Tyrell Bannermen to side with Cersei, which is why the Tyrells were able to be taken down.
Yeah, and
because
we see
they didn't have their other
betrayed.
houses fighting for them.
Yeah, we see Randall Tarly and Dickon riding with Bronn behind Jaime as the marching up to Highgarden happens. So I think that's the show's answer, is that some of the Tyrells' biggest bannermen changed sides, which disrupted the whole dynamic. Even still, it seems like actually taking the castle without a siege is a little bit hand-wavy. Yeah. I'm not too worried about that, because honestly, I would rather skip the scene where the fighting happens in order to make time for Jaime to talk to Olenna.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Which is the best part of the whole episode.
Oh, so good. So good. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's over, isn't it?
So the plot didn't call for a siege. So yeah.
And we see the gold being packed up. So that's where she's gonna get the gold from.
The literal payoff. But
what did Joffrey call that sword? Widow's wail. He really was a cunt.
What did Sandor say about people who name their swords? Cunts name their sword.
Yeah.
There were a lot of callbacks in this episode. I loved that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. I liked, that whole conversation. You could quote any two lines and say that was a great exchange. But I was just thinking, like, did we fight well at least? And he's like, well, as well as could be expected.
Yeah.
Given that half of your army joined our side. So, and here we are.
It's such a respectable meeting.
Yeah. She's just patiently waiting, dressed in black, kind of. She sees them out, marching, and she just kind of says, "Yep, I know what's coming." No sense belaboring it at this point. And her entire bloodline has kind of already been wiped out, so it's like fatalistic at the end there. But going to get in one last dig at least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, she's not really got anything left to live for, except for one last dig. I did like all the different lines she was throwing out there. It was such a cordial visit, but at the same time, it's like Jaime says that he learns from his mistakes, and she's like, "Oh, you must be very wise by now."
Right.
And she's just got all of these little digs, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And she also says to Jaime that Cersei is your problem. And that she is a monster, and her problem was she couldn't imagine the things. She wasn't capable of imagining the things that Cersei would do, and that's the thing that a lot of the fans have been saying is, Jaime, you got to get out of there. This is not for you.
Yeah.
Well,
and she calls it out. You really do love her. It's too late, isn't it? He's like,
it's gone beyond your control. And that's, I think, it's such a great little storytelling situation to set up, because everybody is on the side of like, yeah, Jaime, you got to get out of there. But at the same time, literally, where's he going to go?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
she tells him after she finds out, okay, this is how I'm dying. He can't change my mode of death at this point. Or he could if he wanted to.
Yeah.
And then she tells him, yeah, it was me. And I want Cersei to know that it was me. I killed your son. And the look in Jaime's face, because what would be different if they hadn't blamed Tyrion for Joffrey's death? If Tyrion wouldn't be with Daenerys right now, there wouldn't have been anyone to take care of Daenerys's forces while she was away with the dragon. There are so many things that Tyrion has done because of this. Tywin would still be alive, maybe. There's so many different things that would have happened. The Lannisters would have been in a much better position, in my opinion, had they never blamed Tyrion for Joffrey's death.
Of course, yeah.
And he's realizing this right now. And let's flash back to the first season. Jaime and Tyrion are best friends. And he's realizing right now, my best friend is innocent of this thing. Now, is he going to be able to forgive Tyrion for killing his father now that he knows that he was innocent?
Honestly, I feel like that was not part of his plan. He's not happy about it, but I cannot imagine Jaime holding that particular grudge.
No.
So this leads me to wonder, where can Jaime go? Well, he's got a brother out there that didn't kill his son. And I have a prediction, and it could be off, but this is an interesting way to go. Jaime returns and informs Cersei, and Cersei doesn't care. It doesn't change anything in her mind about Tyrion. And that's what it will be, what it takes to force Jaime to...
I'm intrigued because it seems like that could be the wedge, but it also seems like Euron could be the wedge. So I'm wondering what the show is planning there.
Well, pincer, I can also see multiple veg. Yeah, pincer move. The pincer move.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, any other ideas?
I mean, I agree with you that the idea that he could go to Tyrion is now the first opportunity for him to say maybe that's an option. You know. Although I don't think he's there, you know, like I do think his response here would be to go back to tell Cersei. And I agree with you also that Cersei is just going to feel like, well, I decided a long time ago that all of them were my enemies. And so it kind of really doesn't matter who did which part. And so she's probably not going to care that much. He's going to be frustrated. But my guess is that, like, I mean, again, this is a question of whether or not the show is planning to fulfill the fantasy tropes or to subvert them. Because if it's going to fulfill them, then what's going to happen is the dramatic irony of Jaime being put in a situation with Cersei, like he was with Aerys, where she's about to do something extra horrible, and he's going to have to kill her to stop her doing it. That, I think, would be the tropey way for it to go.
Yeah, and that goes along with one thing that Paulette said. This may be where the seeds are planted for Jaime to become the Queenslayer. He's already the Kingslayer.
Yeah.
And she also says, I feel like Cersei needs to say, I feel all Cersei needs to say is one line: burn them all. Yeah. So, Chooch, any thoughts?
No, not really. The one comment I heard on, or one statement was that Lady Olenna is the only person in Game of Thrones to win their own death.
True. Yeah, she did. And can we just all say, and Paulette has said it, I've said it many times, Diana Rigg was awesome. She is
Yeah.
amazing. Paulette said at the beginning of the show, she said, when I was a little girl, I wanted to be Diana Rigg because of the Avengers. She was Emma Peel. And now I still want to be Diana Rigg because she's Elena. And I agree. She's called Queen of Thorns for a reason. And she was played so fantastically by Diana Rigg. It blew away all of my expectations 100%. And I want to give her an award, but I don't know what it would be. I just want to say thank you for this portrayal.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. That's pretty good.
Gee.
Yeah, that was another meme for those of you who might be listening only in audio. The one last little detail that I kind of liked as sort of an interesting grace note to the scene was Elena pointing out that I really didn't intend it to be such a ghastly spectacle when Joffrey died. I had never seen the poison work before and wouldn't probably have done it that way if I had known, because that was not the plan, to have it be this big horrible thing. I wanted him to be dead, but I wasn't trying to make it this whole shocking spectacle.
Yeah, she wasn't trying to hurt him. She just wanted him gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of Viv's notes, her detailed description of Joffrey's death, similar to the description Cersei was giving to Ilaria of what she was going to watch her daughter go through.
Mm-hmm.
Chilling. Final thoughts, Viv, had about the cinematography in general. Just rumors of them doing feature-length episodes could bode well, because you can tell they cut it in half and they really used the budget they would have used. These armies and the dragons and the cinematography, everything's just been amazing. But overall, she was very nonplussed about the Dany and Jon meeting. She felt they didn't really deliver on their scenes together.
Yeah.
Certainly not compared to how they've had others enter the fray, and I got zero chemistry between them, while others reported it being off the chart.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle there, I think. I mean, I was glad to have it happen, and I like the idea that they're butting heads, but also just from a satisfaction standpoint, they kind of don't really resolve anything. They're kind of at odds and nothing happens. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, you should kneel to me. No. You should help me with the Night King. No. Dun, 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 dun.
Can I get some dragon glass? All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's going to be more payoff there, and I would agree that this episode was, I mean, for this big momentous meeting, it was lacking in some level of narrative payoff. But I think it's because it's ongoing. You know what I mean? It's not this climax yet.
Yeah. So Marco says they say the budget for the next episode is more than the Battle of the Bastard.
Ooh.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. The next episode is titled The Spoils of War.
We're going to have the Dothraki finally enter the fray, maybe? Because in theory, there's a whole army of them around. But we saw the Unsullied this time.
They really need something to do.
There's a lot of gold that's got to find its way back to the Iron Bank, maybe not.
Yeah. Well, and then the dragons too might get involved, because, of course, what was specifically brought up in this episode was Dany's suggestion that she take the dragons out to go burn Euron's fleet.
Yeah.
And now they're going to have a pretty good idea where they're at. Although they'll probably teleport to the north of the wall or something.
Yeah.
So what does everyone rate this?
Yeah, ratings. I'm going to give this one 8 parting shots.
Ooh, there you go. I'm going to give it See, I'm what I keep going to is the thing that was making me mad about it. Yeah, so I'm just gonna say 8 out of 10 teleporting Kraken ships. It would be higher except for that whole piece of it, because there was a lot of it that I really liked, but that just bugs me because it's forcing huge narrative stakes to happen because of those shenanigans rather than just using those to kind of grease the wheels of the story.
And I am surprised by that because you made that fine for me. I am giving this 10 out of 10.
Ooh.
Queen Diana Riggs. And
Viv gave it a 4 out of 5 rotting Ramsay Boltons. I still really hate that guy for killing Walden the baby.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about grudges earlier. Viv can hold them.
I feel as if I am the only one out of sync here. But that gives us 8.5.
Well, I'm glad for you that stuff didn't bother you. I mean, I don't want anyone to not like it. It's more just like for whatever reason, even though I've been the one that's kind of tried to brush that stuff away before, it just got to me this time.
Yeah, and Paulette gave it a 10 out of 10 badass poison divas killing her own death scene. And Marco gave it a 7.5. And then there's a bunch of Portuguese, but I can't translate that.
Yeah. We've got some international viewers watching us today.
Yes, we do.
Welcome.
From Brazil. Yeah, we need that real-time translator, universal translator. Well, I think that wraps us.
Yeah.
Moving forward. It's great. We're not going to have any breaks this season. You know, the episodes are coming bam, 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 week after week. So we will be here next week doing what we do.
Yeah. I forget. Is it 7 episodes this season? Is that
correct? Yeah.
Right.
And then also in Viv's notes. Oh my God, only 4 episodes left. Crazy.
All right.
Crazy. All right.
Oh, and Marco, thanks, sorry. One is from Brazil and one is from Malaysia. Sorry about that.
Nice.
Yeah. I wonder what triggered such so many new people joining us. I don't know. Some algorithm picked us up at some point, I guess.
But I am loving it, and I love having you guys here. You definitely added to the conversation.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
If you have feedback for the Beyond the Wall podcast, you can email us at btw@specficmedia.com. You can also leave us a comment on the website. Go to specficmedia.com where you'll find a shiny BTW button. That'll take you right to our page. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 3.0 Unported license. Feel free to share and remix. Just give us credit and don't charge money for it.